Need to use this one.
Hello.
You have to hold it.
You have to hold it really close.
Testing. Ooh. Um, yes, and so we also have Sean here, Sean Hannigan. He is a current select board member, but he also, for the past 3.5 years, and before that he was at what was it? The planning board for 10 years. And so my name is Madeleine Kondo, and this is Ethan Strominger. We are members of the Bedford Residents for Ranked Choice Voting group. It's not really yet an organization. So first we're going to watch the movie. Then we're going to have Greg show a very short slide presentation because this documentary is quite nice, but it really doesn't explain the ins and outs of ranked choice voting. And Greg made a very nice slide presentation that will show you how that works. And then there will be a panel discussion. And then that's it. And the most important thing is that all of you who are not here to vote at the special town meeting on November 3rd. And that's it.
All right, thank you. As Madeline said, I'm Greg Dennis from Voter Choice Massachusetts. This is a short film made about the effort to sustain ranked choice voting in Maine. Maine won ranked choice voting on the ballot in 2016. And it talks about, and it showcases, some of the difficulties of not only winning an electoral reform, but keeping it, and how people's minds can be changed over time. So it's a pretty short film, but I think it's a pretty interesting look at that effort in Maine. I'm going to turn up the volume.
Right now, the country is experiencing divisiveness in politics that's probably never been seen before since the Civil War.
We agree about so much more than we disagree about, but we have a system that doesn't allow us to express that.
But that's not the point here.
Why didn't you do it?
People feel like they're often voting for the lesser of two evils. They just have to choose the candidate that isn't going to screw up the worst.
We need a completely new framework for how we do politics.
Have you signed the ranked choice voting petition? Yes. Have you signed the ranked choice voting petition? Excuse me, have you signed the ranked choice voting petition?
Yes, we have.
So in our current system, you can only pick one candidate. The minute you have more than two candidates, then you have the risk that a few candidates might pull from overlapping bases of support, and you have this problem of spoilers or vote splitting. But the reality is we need to be blaming the system. It's the system that's the spoiler.
So that's what this is all about. The job itself, you go to whatever university.
Ranked choice voting is a simple system. Rank the candidates in order of your preference. As simple as 1, 2, 3. We end up with a majority winner.
It's something that is just inherent in our daily life, right? We all rank things. If I go to the store and, I like the onion bagel, but if they don't have the onion bagel, then I know I'm gonna get the everything bagel. We have a first choice, a second choice, and a third choice. And why not be able to elect our candidates that way?
So it's either going to be by town or it's going to be by county, because we'll have to turn these into the Secretary of State with all of the petitions.
Ranked choice voting is easy for voters. You just go in and mark on your ballot which candidate is your first choice, your second choice, and so on. The count begins by looking only at the first choices. If any candidate receives a majority, more than 50%, of first choices, they win immediately and the election is over. It's when no candidate receives a majority of first choices that ranked choice voting makes a difference. The last place candidate is eliminated, and votes for that candidate are transferred to those voters' next choices. If any candidate now has a majority, they are the winner. If not, the process repeats. Eliminate the last place candidate and transfer those votes to voters' next choices. This continues until one candidate is elected with a majority of votes.
I think some people didn't understand it. I had several legislators come up and say right to my face, well, I just think it's stupid. There were a lot of people who said, oh, it's unconstitutional. I think when people come to power under a particular system and understand how to win in a particular system, they are loath to change to something that they don't know how to win in.
Now look at what seems to some people as an undemocratic idea, organized voting, focused on stopping a particular candidate.
State Rep Heather Saraki fears the untested voting method will further alienate the public.
Ranked choice voting dramatically changes the way we vote. It's not clear, it's confusing.
I particularly have been wrongly accused of being opposed to ranked choice voting. As an administrator, I think I have to be honest about the difficulties that we're going to face in implementing it. It's not simple. It's not simple to implement. Where something goes wrong, they're not going to say, well, this system didn't work. They're going to say, Matt Dunlap's incompetent.
Leaders head to the voting booth.
On election day in 2016, ranked choice voting passed with a 52% majority, and we were ecstatic. But very quickly, we realized that the legislature had no intention whatsoever of honoring the majority vote of people here in Maine.
They called a special session of the legislature and passed a bill delaying and repealing ranked choice voting.
It'll be signed by the Speaker and sent to the Senate.
We were heartbroken. Within minutes, we composed a press release and announced our intentions to launch the People's Veto campaign.
We may have lost the battle, but we have not lost the war. I'm a Vietnam combat veteran. I tend to take emotion out of the equation. What's the situation? What's the problem? What has to be done? And you just do it.
This is a petition to reinstate ranked choice voting, to get this on the primary election ballot in June. That's something you can support?
Yeah.
This is a huge task to collect over 61,000 signatures in less than 3 months in the Maine winter.
Hi, are you folks registered voters in Maine?
A massive winter storm is slamming the East Coast, making travel extremely dangerous.
People from every party are getting involved in this campaign. From the Democrats, from the Republicans, we have Green Party folks, Libertarians.
It's more than 400 cities, towns, plantations, and islands across the state of Maine.
It's a huge amount of work for all of us, right? For you.
We have 1 week left to gather 61,123 signatures to win the People's Veto and restore Maine's ranked choice voting law, and we are almost there.
And there are people all across the state who are so mad right now because the politicians in this very building have been overturning the will of the people over and over and over again.
Are you ready to rank your choices this June?
Every single time the powerful special interests in Augusta have said, no, you can't, we've said, yes, we can. We're not some sort of small group of people. We are the people.
state in the country to implement ranked choice voting in a statewide election this June. Secretary of State Matthew Dunlap says voters will also decide the future of the new voting method itself.
With your main news morning on the LOB Lobster Network.
Ranked choice voting, give us an update on where we are, because you're going to have to deal with this as the administrator of elections in the state of Maine.
One of the most curious aspects of ranked choice voting is how do you conduct a recount? It could be a couple of months before you know who your governor is, and then the question is, who's the legitimate governor? And you could have cars burning in the street.
It's really sad that we had to file a lawsuit to get politicians in Augusta to do what the Maine people told them they wanted to do. Twice. Not once, twice.
And leave the materials where they are. So you already figured this out. Good. What are you going to put on the X?
There was a movement in big cities and small across the country in the early part and to the middle part of the 20th century. And they used this ranked choice to make sure you weren't splitting your votes. It worked. It worked. And diverse interests and diverse people began to be represented. Well, that didn't go over so well with some people. And once the Cold War began, post-World War II, sadly, repeals happened. Since about 2000, there's been a dozen cities adopting ranked choice voting for their mayor, for their councils, for their various government seats.
We've been using ranked choice voting in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, for the past decade. Election after election, voters say that they just love ranked choice voting. 80-some% of the voters say that they would never want to go back to using the old system.
A historic election for the city of Minneapolis.
Philippe Cunningham beat Council President Barb Johnson. Johnson held her seat for 20 years.
Hello, sir. Do you live in the area? I'm Nika. I want to run for state rep. I want to represent you.
With ranked choice voting, psychologically, I think voters feel like I'm going to come out because my vote's going to matter somewhere down that river. That will draw out candidates whose leadership has been systematically and structurally shut down by business as usual.
Yeah, but I got to win first, so spread the word. Okay. The United States is one of few countries where leaders are still elected by plurality voting. Most countries now use ranked choice voting or other systems that better represent voters. Ireland has used ranked choice voting since 1921.
It's incredibly empowering. I'm a member of a political party in Ireland, so I know where my number one vote is going to go. But I actually really enjoy the opportunity to give second and third votes, because it makes me think about, well, what other values do I have?
Mainers head to the polls tomorrow. For the first time in a statewide election, voters will be using a ranked choice voting system.
Ranked choice voting puts more power in the hands of voters. On June 12th, you can protect ranked choice voting by voting yes on question 1.
Maine's current governor is incensed over the change.
I will probably not certify the election. I will leave it up to the courts.
You don't say, okay, well, then him, and then him. No, wait, then her. That's splitting up your vote. It's almost communism.
Maine voters are going to go to the polls today and stand up to Governor LePage because his comments are outrageous. On election day, I'm kind of like a machine. You know, I wake up and I've got a job to do, which is to squeeze out every last vote possible before the polls close.
Hi, my name is Eve, and I'm calling from the Committee for Ranked Choice Voting.
I'd feel comfortable going in that initial door and knocking on each of the doors that are around me.
RCV! You know, I was up at 6 this morning to put up the yes on one sign. All the signs I put up are gone.
I've measured this before, this ain't my first rodeo.
Okay.
Something somewhere around there.
Measure out 250 feet from the front door of the voting place. I had none beyond here, and the others were over there. So those should not have been disturbed at all.
How'd you find the experience of ranking?
Perfectly fine. It allows me to spread my vote out to, maybe a secondary candidate that I like almost as much.
Voters are so tired of our dysfunctional democracy.
If we change the electoral system, then we can start to bring out that nuance. We can start to encourage politicians to reach across the divide.
That's the number that matters.
So the national partner for the Bangor Daily News has called the race for yes on what?
They stole it from us, and we fought, and we got it back. That's what democracy looks like.
It was an historic election here in the state because, well, Maine became the first state in the nation to use ranked choice voting in a statewide primary election. Secretary of State Matthew Dunlap tells us the voter turnout was up across the state.
There are no cars burning in the street. The National Guard hasn't been called out. It actually went pretty smoothly.
This is no longer a campaign. This is a movement. We're going to work with good people across the country who want to win ranked choice voting and bring it to their cities and counties and states.
Maine has inspired us in Massachusetts.
Let's get started with voter choice. Massachusetts 2018 statewide kickoff conference.
I am now opening the public hearing relative to ranked choice voting.
Madam Chair, committee, I'm invited here by Representative Reed as an issue expert.
My name's Jacob Fry. I'm the mayor of Minneapolis, and I am a huge supporter of ranked choice voting.
It's an improvement to democracy. It's really making sure that people's voices are heard and that the mayor is somebody who most people in Santa Fe want.
We had no power when we started, but we had the power of an idea, and we had the power of a broken system, and we had the power of a people hungry to do something about it. This could be a flame that could just light up the country.
All right, I hope you, well, that's louder than I thought. I hope you enjoyed the movie. It was co-produced by some people in Massachusetts, and that's part of the reason why you saw these Massachusetts figures. And Massachusetts was featured a lot throughout the film. Well, I was in the corner of one meeting there. And I think it helps show that it seems like a scary idea at first to a lot of people. It seemed scary at the beginning to the Secretary of State. He thought there were going to be cars burning in the street. And then when all was said and done, he's like, well, that went pretty smoothly. And then he said, look at how great a job I did on this. So it turned around pretty quickly. And now I think he's actually running for governor of Maine right now. So do you want to go into the presentation? You have some?
Yes, that's you.
Yeah.
Right, okay. But, all right, and then we're going to have a...
And then have a Q&A? Yeah. All right, so I thought we would just recap. Okay. Can I show? That's fine. I'll just do it this way. And we'll do it like this for this projector, because when you start moving this projector, the projector auto focuses and puts it out of whack. If you hadn't got a chance, there's the opportunity to vote in a mock election, and there's this URL or this QR code, and we'll hand out some of those forms. It's to try out ranked choice voting. Just give it a shot. And we'll look at the results afterwards. So I just want to recap the problem that ranked choice voting is solving. So let's say we're having an election and there's, this is election for favorite candy, and there's two candidates, Reese's and candy corn. And let's say there's early polls show about 60% of voters want Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and about 40% want candy corn. So it looks like Reese's is going to win this election. That is until, a third candidate enters the race, Reese's Minis. Now those Reese's votes are split. And on election day, candy corn wins with 40% of the vote, with less than a majority of the vote. This is the spoiler effect, the vote splitting effect that ranked choice voting helps solve. It's not an effect that's just reserved for toy examples. Here's the recall election. It happens in local races all the time. So here's the recall election in Fall River in 2019. The mayor of Fall River at the time was indicted on various scandals. And there was a recall election, and in that recall election, about 61% of people voted to recall him, and 39% of the people voted to keep him in office. On the recall election, you gotta then fill the office with a new election, and he decided to run for his seat that he was recalled from. And in that recall election, here were the vote totals. He came in first place with 35% of the vote, and the remaining 65% of the vote split over 4 other candidates. So again, we see, 4 different Reese's Peanut Butter Cups against the one candy corn option here. And Correa won without a majority of the vote. We've also seen, this happens in local elections all the way up to presidential elections. We've had many presidential elections where the winner has not won with a majority of the vote. It's unclear whether they would have won. In some cases, they may have won anyway, or maybe in all cases they would have won anyway. But we're electing people to the highest office in the land without them demonstrating that they have a majority support of the American public. So to recap the negatives of the current plurality voting system, we see that winners may lack majority of support. As a consequence, voters often feel pressured to vote for the lesser of the two evils. They can't, if you really like Reese's Minis, you feel like you can't vote for them, that you have to vote for Reese's Peanut Butter Cups anyway. That threat of vote splitting discourages candidates from running at all, inhibits candidates from throwing their hat in the ring because they want to be the source of that vote splitting. And that lowers the diversity of the candidate pool, means fewer campaigns are out there driving voter turnout, and campaigns are generally less welcoming, inclusive, and engaging than they could be. So what are we going to do? Well, here's current ballots that you see in cities and towns in Massachusetts. I'm sure your ballots in Bedford look very much like this. Depending on the office you're voting for, you may be asked to vote for up to 1 or up to 2. I don't remember, you may have some elections that ask you to vote for up to 3 for some town offices. And if we were to adopt ranked choice voting here in Bedford, we would collapse these 3 ballots into a single ranked ballot for all offices, regardless of the number of seats that are being elected. And voters are asked to vote for their first choice in their first column. And then if they have a second choice, they don't have to have one, but if they have a second choice, vote for their second choice in the second column, third choice in the third column, as many and as few choices as they want. They can stop ranking whenever they want. And the way the votes are tallied is you first just look at this first column alone and you tally up the choices in this first column. So let's say after this election, we see Mary's in the lead with 36 votes, followed by Diego at 24, Sally with 12, and Robbie with 28. There's 100 voters here, so the 36 votes also means 36%. No candidate has a majority. So in a plurality election, you would simply say Mary wins, but Mary hasn't demonstrated a majority yet. So what you do in ranked choice is you eliminate the last place vote getter. Here, that's Sally. And everyone that voted for Sally, everyone who had Sally marked in their first column, has their vote counted towards their next choice instead, towards the vote they had in their second column if they had one. Still, after that, after Sally's eliminated, still no candidate has a majority, so you eliminate the next lowest vote getter, that's Robbie, until you're down to 2 candidates, at which point one of the 2 is guaranteed to have the majority of the vote. Here, that's Mary with 58%, 58 votes, and she wins with the majority. She also had a plurality, and very often you'll see the one that has a plurality in the first round go on to win a majority, but not always. If you're voting for 2 seats, and in Bedford, select board races very often have 2 seats, as do other races. What you do is you tally the votes over again from the beginning in the way we proposed for Bedford. You tally the votes over again from the beginning, except you eliminate the person that won the first seat. That's Mary. So just right off the bat, if you voted for Mary and Mary was elected, Mary was in your first column, we're going to start right off and count your votes towards your next towards your next choice instead. So once we eliminate the prior winner, then we just repeat that same process over again. No one has a majority, so eliminate Sally, and then Diego wins with the second seat, for the second seat. Now, it's important to remember that regardless of the mechanics of the counting, people may have questions about it. Regardless of those mechanics, the ballot, what we're actually asking voters to do is simple, which is just to fill out this ballot. That's all they're being asked to do, which is just rank your candidates in order of preference, which is something we do. We rank options in our lives every day. Sometimes we don't even know and realize when we're ranking when we are. You know, for example, here's the select board and town manager of Bedford put together goals for the year, and they put together ranked options of their goals. And I'm sure Sean could attest he's never had a constituent say, I don't understand what this ranking means here. We understand what a first choice is, and a second choice is, and a third choice is, and so on. RCV is used in a number of places around the country. In Massachusetts, it's used in 2 cities so far. And 10 additional cities have requested, 10 additional cities and towns have requested the legislature for permission to use it. So there's a lot of cities and towns asking for it, and Bedford could become this 11th. And there's dozens more sort of in the queue that are working their way forward, that are looking to put together proposals of the kind that are going to be brought before town meeting here. You know, more than 20 or 25 some odd states use it in some form or another for some kind of election, and for elections around the world, including in Australia and Ireland for more than a century. Recapping the benefits, again, ranked choice voting ensures that the winners you elect have majority support, brings out a larger and more diverse candidate pool. One of the things I didn't touch on is it limits gamesmanship, in particular bullet voting that happens in, may happen in town elections today. If you're going to vote in a race where there's multiple people elected, maybe you're looking at a select board race, and there's 3 or 4 candidates, and you really want one of them to win, you may feel reluctant about also voting for your second choice. You may just bullet vote for your first choice to give them additional oomph in some way. And that can work today, because the system you have today when you vote in the multi-seat elections is, if you vote for your second choice, that could end up defeating your first choice. With ranked choice voting, that goes away. You can vote for your second choice freely without, you don't have to, but you shouldn't restrict yourself to one choice out of some sort of strategy, because it's not going to benefit you. It also helps foster civil and more positive campaigning, because it's in the interest of candidates to reach out to supporters of their opponents. Right? You say, I know you're not my first choice, but here's where we have common ground. Here's some issues we can agree on. This is why I deserve your next choice. This doesn't apply to Bedford, but if we were in a city, cities like Boston have preliminary elections, they can eliminate their preliminary election by eliminating it, by adopting ranked choice voting. So let's go see those. Has everybody had a chance to vote? Okay, good, because I don't have the results up yet, but I'll bring the results up in a second. This was the ballot everyone saw.
You need to use the microphone.
Thank you for the reminder. This is the ballot everyone saw on their phone. I'll give you a few more minutes to. It's a tough choice. There's so many great trails in Bedford. And
Oh, of course, me too. You're all nice.
and I looked at a list. You could make a list of like a dozen of them if you get really granular about it. So how was that voting? Does anybody not understand what they were doing when they were just choosing a first choice, a second choice, or third choice? When we run these mock elections around the state, people come in, many sometimes never hearing about ranked choice or not really knowing what it is. They get the ballot, they fill it out, and they were never told anything about it, right? They weren't told how it was counted. They weren't told much beyond what appears in the ballot, and yet they're able to fill it out without any trouble. And so later, when you say, well, the main argument against it is that it's too difficult. I say, what do you mean? I just did it, and I didn't even know what it was before I walked in here. All right, ready for the results? Drum beat, drum roll. Okay. Oh, this is unexciting. Okay. We had 7 voters, and there were Great Meadows won 4 votes, won a majority in the first round. So we know it's going to win a majority. But if you do the eliminations anyway, there was 1 vote for Fawn Lake. When you eliminate Fawn Lake, the person who voted Fawn Lake first voted Old Reservoir second. And so in that final round, it was Great Meadows 4 to Old Reservoir for 3.
Wow, that's a close election.
So closer in the final round than in the first round, right? So it gives you more information about where the voters stand in this case. So if you just had this first result, you might say, wow, Great Meadows won in a landslide, right? It's by far and away the favorite. But the final round gives you a more nuanced look to say, well, if we're really down to these two, it's much more divided. And that can impact the way we understand the electorate, the way that legislators understand their constituencies and who they might need to address in the future and so on. So that's it. And then we hope everyone shows up to the special town meeting on November 3rd, Bedford High School Auditorium. And the town meeting begins at 6:30 and registration at 5:30. And now it's time for the Q&A. Any questions?
So I think it would be helpful to clarify what happens when you only vote for one.
Okay. So maybe I'll come closer to Sean in case I need to hand the mic to him. Or maybe we could both, yeah. Won't be too far away from one another. So if you only vote for one, yeah, that is a comment. Voting for one is a perfectly valid way to vote. You are not obliged to vote for any further choices. What it means, what a voter is communicating when they only vote for one is they say, I want this person to win, and if this person doesn't have a chance to win, then at that point, I'd prefer to abstain. I don't care. I'd prefer to abstain, sort of cast a blank vote, rather than express an opinion. People do go into the voting booth today, blank races, right? They'll leave it blank. People have a right to vote, and they have a right to abstain, so it's treated as an abstention after that point.
So did I get that right? When there are multiple open seats, the first seat doesn't have to have a majority?
The question was, when it's a multi-seat election, sort of how does it work, and is it still a majority threshold? It still is. So if it's a multi-seat election in the way we have it proposed for Bedford, if you're electing 2 seats, what you do is you run the regular single seat method or with the ballots, and whoever wins that has won the first seat. So it's still a majority threshold, and a majority threshold to win that first seat. Then to elect the second seat, you just repeat the process over again from the beginning, that same single seat method, but whoever won that first seat, they're just eliminated from the get-go. And anybody that had voted for them gets their vote counted toward, their next choice treated as their first choice for the purposes of electing that second seat. Does that make sense? So if you had voted for Sean first and me second, if we were in a race, and your first vote was for Sean, and he wins a majority in the tally of the first seat, he wins that first seat. And then when we start to tally this next seat, we start over again from the beginning, but every vote for Sean counts towards its next choice instead. It's like you just crossed his name off the top of the ballots where he's first. So your vote for Sean would count as, in the tally for the next seat, it would be as if I'm at the top of your ballot.
But what I understand reading to mean the first seat getter has to have more than 50%.
Every seat getter has to win more than 50%.
So what happens if someone does not get 50%? Is that
It's mathematically impossible because you're going down to two candidates. So unless it's an exact tie, but barring an exact tie, when there's two candidates, if there's no exact tie, someone's getting more than 50% and someone's getting less than 50% because there's only two candidates left. Right, because it's 50% of the remaining, it's 50% of the ballots still in play, of 50% of those that haven't abstained. If you've abstained, yeah, well, we can't prevent you from saying, I abstain. It's 50% of people that haven't abstained from that choice.
Yeah, it's these kinds of nuances that make it hard to talk about it with people. So if we had a simpler way, like when people ask these questions, to have like a bullet point to be able to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
I had a question too, because I think when there's one person to be elected, it's very straightforward. It's always a majority. But I was kind of wondering, along with Rainu, if there's two candidates to be elected, what if you get a case where 4 people run and it's like 40, 30, 20, 10, that is up to 100. The person that gets 40, because they top the ballot, would pass, they would win, right? If it's two candidates elected, because doesn't the one topping, the first one goes to the person topping the ballot?
If they get the majority.
If they get a majority. So if
what
it.
What happens in the case where it's 40, 30, 20, 10? Do you go through that exercise until one gets the majority?
Right.
Okay.
You do a single, you treat each seat like its own single seat election.
Okay.
So if you understand how you elect one seat, if there's 2 seats to be elected, you repeat that twice. If there's 3 seats to be elected, you do that 3 times. So if it's 40, 30, 20, 10, no one has a majority, so the one with 10 is eliminated. And if at that point some candidate has no one would have an exact majority at that point. No one would have a majority at that point because at most you have 50 and you got to have greater than 50 to get a majority. Next candidate's eliminated. Then whoever has a majority at that point, because you're down to 2, wins the first seat. And you've elected the first seat. And if, in order to choose the next seat, you do a new single seat, you treat it like another single seat election, except whoever won the first seat is just taken out of the running, because they already won.
All right, go ahead first. I'm going to, if you don't mind, borrow the microphone.
I think for Bedford residents, it's hard to think about this exactly the same way because, first of all, I can remember in the last 20 years maybe one race where we've had more than 2 candidates for an opening. Yeah, exactly. And so people are going to say, well, why do we need this then? Because one of the things that ranked choice voting does is it offers encouragement for more people to run because they have a possibility through this system of getting in a better, getting in a position. The second thing I think for Bedford residents are going to think about is that we very rarely, although sometimes, have 2 seats exactly the same in an election. We may yeah, select board, maybe 2 people, but it could be somebody who is filling in somebody else's term as well as somebody in a full term. And those would have to be treated as separate elections in this process. So I think that some of those little kind of, and they're not just in Bedford, but our experience in Bedford may make it a little bit hard to explain to people why we want to do this. I think the most important thing is that in the situations that we have more candidates than 2 for any opening, we get to say our druthers about all the possible candidates if we choose. The other thing is, I think that, again, the important thing is that maybe more people will run for positions because it isn't just the guy who's always done it, or woman, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be sexist, who's done it for the last 20 years. So I think that that's where the League of Women Voters supports any kind of voting system, including ranked choice voting, that offers voters the opportunity to really express their opinions. So I just wanted to say that, and I think it's hard in Bedford because of our recent experience, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have.
That was very well said.
That was very well said, and I want to echo all of those points and also add a couple of things. In that election that you refer to, I know of a candidate that didn't run for not wanting to be a spoiler. So maybe it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. And the second thing is that I think this would have more of an influence if the state itself were to adopt it. And one of the things that we can do by having town meeting vote for this and then having the town election vote for it, getting the home rule petition in, to say to the legislature, we're now one of many towns, and hopefully that number grows, to build support for this to be statewide. So we're kind of making that type of a push as well by this effort.
We've done amazing.
Thank you. I agree with you. I think that for me, one of the more compelling reasons is that a person doesn't want to be a spoiler, either by running or as a voter, diluting, you know, and I think that one of the films mentioned that you really like candidate 3, but you know that they're a minority candidate, so you end up voting for candidate 1 because he or she is your second choice, but is much more likely to win. I think that, to me, makes it very compelling, as well as from the candidate's point of view. And I have a personal story. I can remember one of my very first presidential elections. There was a third-party candidate, and I can remember I live in Minnesota, so I know that Mondale's going to win Minnesota. So I'm going to vote for Anderson because I think he has a lot to say, but I know that Mondale's going to win. You know, and if in a ranked choice vote, that would be a little difference. You know, I still would have probably voted for Anderson, but I would have certainly put Mondale as my second choice.
And that's an excellent point. And that's why I would argue that the ranked choice voting system actually is simpler, if you think about it, because if you're in the current system and you have a case like Susie just mentioned where you have multiple candidates, you have to sit there and strategize. Who do I think is going to win? Am I throwing my vote away by voting for the person I really like? You get to kind of watch the polls. In this system, and I know it's different because people aren't used to it, but it's much simpler. The person I like the best gets 1, the person I like the second best gets 2, the third person 3. There's no worrying about how they are in the polls or where they stand or who has a chance, because that's all going to work itself out.
Yeah, it takes a little time to get adjusted to not strategizing We sometimes find people confused. They look at the ranked choice ballot and say, but who should I mark your first choice? But wait, but what do I do with my second? Mark your second choice. Oh, it's like almost jarring for them that they get to vote sincerely and honestly, because they're not used to doing that. They're conditioned to thinking of it as some sort of strategic game. And the fact that they can vote according to their conscience is something that needs a little bit of sort of like readjusting to.
Can I say one more?
You can sit right next to him.
I think it's important that people understand that not only is the voting process simple, maybe not the decision-making along that voting, but that it's very easy to vote, 1, 2, 3, however many. Secondly, the computer systems that count the votes can handle all this, okay, get rid of this person, put their votes in. It's not a big deal, no matter what any election official might want to tell you. Even our town clerk, I'm sure would say, we don't go back and check. The system does it for us. So it's not hard for us voters, and it's not hard for the voting systems to handle.
Madeline?
Thank you.
I'm going to go back to the sequential voting, because what I wonder is if somebody votes for the winner and he gets removed from the race, then that voter gets a second vote, basically. And how do you explain that one person, one vote in that case, in the sequential way of voting,
Right.
plural, I mean, voting for more than one seat?
Well, what I would say is that that's exactly the same as it is today in Bedford. When you vote for a 2-seat select board race, everyone's given 2 votes. Now, there is a legitimate criticism of giving everyone 2 votes, but that is not something that is changing with the proposal that we've brought forward. It's something that's being maintained. There are versions of ranked choice voting that would lead to like proportional results, proportional representation. We've found that that's probably not well suited for executive offices like select board, particularly when there's only 2 seats. That one is more complicated to explain how it's counted. It is what we advocate for city councils, but for town offices and for select boards, our preference is for the method we explained that's a little simpler and a little more conducive, we think, to the role that executive offices play in towns.
So I was just realizing that it is actually better than the current system because there's a guarantee of a majority voting for the first winner.
Yeah, and it eliminates this spoiler issue that causes candidates to bow out before the race has even begun. So it has all the positive effects of ensuring the winners have a majority and encouraging more candidates to run. But it does maintain that aspect that every voter does get multiple votes, which is true today. It's not something that's being changed with this proposal.
So on that point, I said this in a letter to the editor, and I think I said it more eloquently, but I'll try to say it again. So if the person you vote for doesn't win, your vote doesn't matter, right? So you've got more chances to make your vote matter by having ranked choice voting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we do find people say, well, if I only vote for one and they don't have a chance to win, then my vote's not going to count for anyone. That's unfair. And it's like, well, you can only vote for one today. So you are preferring a system that never allows you to have a backup choice to one that gives you the option of having a backup choice doesn't make a lot of sense.
Has ranked choice failed anywhere in Massachusetts?
Failed. at every city, there was the statewide ballot question that fell short. But in terms of the city and town efforts, there has not been a ballot question that has failed, no. And there has not been a town meeting vote that's failed yet.
How many cities, towns and cities
have had votes?
Have not failed.
Have not failed. Okay. Well, it's basically those 10. I mean, those are votes where the home rule petition, came before the city council or came before the town meeting, and on all of those, the city council and town meeting voted in favor.
Bedford, you better listen.
Have there been any problems getting the legislature to enact the home rule petitions that we all will have to do if we vote for?
There has been some friction with that, yeah. I don't know if Bedford has a history of submitting other home rule petitions, but a lot of cities and towns around the state are frustrated with the home rule petition process. The legislature doesn't pass a lot of bills total. We're, almost coming up on a year into the legislative session, and what have they done, like 12 or 13 bills, something? I don't know, passed no more than 20 bills, and a lot of those are routine or nothing substantive. So they don't get a lot done total, and so getting through a home rule petition bill can sometimes be a challenge, and there is somewhat of an allergy to letting cities and towns, try out things on their own. We did get a home rule petition bill through for East Hampton, Massachusetts, and they were allowed to use ranked choice voting, and we're hoping with these other ones piling up, they'll let some more through.
I think that's the key to, if you want to get their attention, we keep piling up these home rule petitions. I mean, now the map had, 10 of them now? Yeah. It starts getting to like 50 or 100, it's going to be harder for them to ignore those. The other point I'll make, because I think this is important, is this is very expressly a nonpartisan initiative. It doesn't by its nature benefit either party. And I think that's important to realize with this. It's just a better way of having people's preferences expressed, no matter what those preferences are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Just one. Yeah, so back to the question about the home rule petition. It feels like it's a black box, so you don't, you can speak to your representative and they can just say, oh, it's stuck, or they're working on it, or, something. So is there any way to, what can I say to my representative to try to get them to forward these measures? What type of pressure can you put on?
Yeah, a lot of it is, just, harass your state legislator, harass your state representative, call them and email them and ask for updates, make sure they understand it's a priority for you. Also remind them that this proposal requires a vote of the public. This is not the town meeting deciding for the entirety of the town that we're going to use ranked choice voting. It's subject to a vote of the public. And we've seen a greater willingness from the legislature to allow home rule petitions like that. So making sure that argument and that fact is understood.
So after we all start to do ranked choice voting across the state, can we take on the whole home rule petition issue, which I think changes the entire constitution of our state, if not something else?
Yeah.
The idea that cities and towns have to go back to the legislature to make these kind of changes is hard, I think.
Well, you know, we've supported a bill that's been in the legislature for a few sessions that would be a local option for ranked choice voting, where, you know, the legislature has made available other kinds of local options, where it's just the legislature passing a bill saying, yep, we give authority to cities and towns to decide for themselves within some parameters that they can do this or that, whether it's local taxes or other measures. So we've put a lot of effort behind those bills, and we're hoping that the local option bill gets through. There are some other, you know, State Senator Becca Rausch has a bill that would, it's meant to be sort of a conversation starter bill rather than one that she knows will seriously make progress, but it's a conversation starter that would open up the door for cities and towns to make many more changes independently without having to go back to the legislature. So it is a conversation, and it's also part of, I think it's part of the frustration with the legislature that has led to the transparency concerns and other kinds of accountability concerns. The frustration around home rule petitions is in the mix of that, that sort of anger at the legislature.
I have a question. Are there numbers regarding whether ranked choice voting has affected voter turnout?
There are numbers for that. So there's a number of studies. The studies don't always agree. I think when you take a look at the studies as a whole, you do see an increase in turnout, not some gigantic increase in turnout, but a modest increase in turnout over time. And we know, you know, historically from countries around the world that those that use fairer voting systems see about a 3 to 5% bump in voter turnout, which is substantial. I mean, a lot of the reforms we do to boost voter turnout don't see anything near that type, sort of bump. So, yeah, there were a lot of the early studies where they'd look at like 1 or 2 elections. They were all over the map in terms of what they were finding. Some were finding increases, staying no change, decreases. But now that we've accumulated some history, it seems to be trending. Okay, now we have a track record of a trend in the upward direction.
So in a country like Ireland, where this has been, you know, a fact for, I don't know how long time, right?
Over a century.
The voter turnout is higher, but I think it's overall in Europe, there's more of a voter turnout than in America.
Yeah, well, most of Europe has, you know, does not use plurality voting. They use fair voting systems. Some ranked choice, some other kinds of usually proportional party-based systems. But yeah, fair voting systems that allow more candidates to run and more voices to be heard and more choices on the ballot do tend to get more voters out.
Another thing that I think is good about this is it gives more information out to people running for office. I mean, you can imagine someone that, let's say they've been in whatever office, the legislature or Congress, for year after year after year, and they keep getting to the general election and they win because their party is popular, and nobody's going to vote for the independent because the independents may be polling at 2% and the voter wants to express their party preferences. If there's ranked choice voting, then it'd be really interesting to see, okay, now how many people are going to vote for the independent? How popular is that person that seems to keep winning? Because are they winning because they're inherently popular, or are they winning because they're just odious people that are running against them? And I think that would be really interesting, and I think that would make our representatives more attuned to what the voters are thinking, to be able to have that extra piece of information.
Those were all great questions. I think we're all set, Madeline?
Yes, I think we are all set. Thank you so much for coming.
You want to ask people to sign in?
Oh, yes. We have a sheet here that you could sign if you are interested in speaking out at the the town meeting in November, yeah. Because that's what it's all about, isn't it?
And bring a neighbor or 3 or 10 to the town meeting to vote.
Yeah.
We'll be out there, we have other things on
One
on the warrant.
One of the things that is very important at town meeting is sometimes you see an opposition just kind of snowballs, and to have supporters kind of break that trend. So if you're willing to speak at town meeting and stand up in front of the microphone, that would be great.
Are you gonna give us bullet points?
Yeah, do you have talking points?
Yeah?
Or like an FAQ that we can take?
There's lots
Yeah, we
of
can work on that.
stuff. We have lots of stuff.
We have, I mean, I think one of the main things is saying you support it.
We've had,
Bullet points too.
for a lot of our climate stuff, we've had good luck with supporters taking one bullet point.
Oh, wow. That
So
sounds
that
good.
it's very short, and different people, different voices are heard saying.
That sounds great.
And they're not saying the same.
Right.
So tired.
Right.
And so we organize that space to our
Okay.
people, we can like split it up.